Good morning. Welcome inside our studios. It is a Monday edition of 5 Clubs here on Golf Channel. You can also listen on the PGA Tour Radio Network on Sirius XM. I am Gary Williams. Great to have you with us. This program always proudly brought to you by Century Insurance, right by you. They invest in all the great things in golf, including their wonderful relationship with the First Tee program, also the United States Golf Association. Of course, they sponsor the first event of the calendar year on the PGA Tour, Golf Pride. When it comes to grips, if you consider all players, every level, all the way up to the best players in the world, no grip is trusted more than Golf Pride. Of course, Peter Millar, everything I wear and have worn for the last 15 years, anything you need, wherever you're going, Peter Millar has you covered. And then, of course, the cradle of American golf, Pinehurst Resort. And it's only about a month and a half away when those cottages at number 8 are going to be available for you. I toured them recently. Unbelievable, not to mention the new clubhouse at Pinehurst number 10. Before we get started, a little belated happy birthday to our boy Johnson Wagner. Had a birthday yesterday. Hope he had a wonderful day. I know he was down with his son testing golf clubs. What an experience for him to go down, spend a couple days with his son, who's a very fine player. I know that was part of the birthday celebration. So happy birthday, Wags. It was a very good day yesterday for one Viktor Hovland, because he went from what everyone assumed was this spiral, this looking into the abyss, and when is he going to look away? Well, as we look at the leaderboard, because we start with the Valspar Championship, it is Viktor Hovland. Guy was 3 back with only a handful of holes to go. The guy who he beat by a shot actually had a 3-shot lead with only 3 of his holes remaining. And Viktor flipped the script on Justin Thomas, and he wins for the 7th time. Jacob Bridgman. How about the kid from Clemson University by way of Inman, South Carolina? What a Florida swing for him. He has a 2nd at the Cognizant. He has a 3rd at the Valspar. Good for him. Bud Colley, how about him? We had him on last week off the 6th at the Players, ties for 4th at the Valspar. Billy Horschel, Florida resident, Florida native. Good week for him. I know he was really smarting, missing that short birdie putt on the 18th hole. Rio Hizatsune, he finishes also in a tie for 4th. And then Davis Riley, there are signs that Davis Riley is coming out of it. He too was in a bad way there to start the year, but again, some good results lately. Corey Connors, it was my pick to win this week, ties for 8th. Lucas Glover off of his good week at the Players, another good top 10 for him. And then finally, Shane Lowry. Shane was right there. He was a shot back to start that final round, got off to a good start, birdied his first 2 holes. He sends the edge repeatedly. This tournament only amplifies what so many of us believe, that cuts and full fields are kind of the essence of what the PGA Tour is. And we got that considering that Justin Thomas was battling on Friday just to see the weekend. And he finds himself with a 3-shot lead with only his 3 remaining holes to play. Not to mention, if you look at some of the players in this field, Jacob Bridgman is a perfect example of the fact that there are so many guys capable. And we know that Viktor Hovland is very capable. He won the FedEx Cup a couple of years ago. He goes on to the Ryder Cup, and on his first hole on Friday morning, he chips in, and you're going, okay, the guy who couldn't chip is now choosing, not putter, but a wedge just off the green to announce his presence with authority, Nuke Lelouch. And yesterday, coming into the week, this is a guy who a week ago Thursday shot 80 at the stadium course. And here's the thing about Viktor that I love, because there's a lot to like, is that he shares. Sometimes you can say maybe to his own detriment that he's sharing thought. And he's talking about the fact that he's got no idea where it's going and that he's in a horrible place and that the game can be exceedingly difficult while altogether remaining in some strange way forever beautiful. So he comes into this week and you're going, well, he's got no chance. One of the things about saying players of this caliber have no chance is that that's a fleeting thought, because there have been countless examples of guys coming in off of rash of missed cuts and not only having a chance to win, but going on and winning. But many of them don't express themselves to the degree that Viktor Hovland does. And even after winning yesterday, when it looked like he was not going to win, somebody asked him what he thought of his golf swing. He said, It's about the same. Boy, I hit a lot of disgusting shots out there, but they actually went where I was looking. I love how forthcoming he is. And I don't know that if at moments when he's in the middle of the heat of competition, if those thoughts, of which he has many, because he goes down rabbit holes, not only about his golf swing, but there was a period where Viktor Hovland was traveling this country post-COVID in his car, listening to podcasts, and not the mainstream kind of stuff that you're going, my gosh, this is kind of wonky, this is kind of weird, this is kind of borderline dark. But Viktor likes to exercise his mind. So even though he won the golf tournament, he said, you know what? I don't know how much I've resolved, and I'm not going to get into some of the technical jargon that he was weighing in on. But the other part of what yesterday late really is a great example of is that opportunity is not the mailman. Hell, opportunity is not even FedEx or Amazon, because opportunity doesn't come every day. Opportunity doesn't come maybe a couple times of the week, and maybe it's some of your homes, and you know who I'm talking about. You know, Amazon, it's like, what are they doing here like 4 days out of the week? FedEx maybe a little bit less frequently. But opportunity doesn't come around that much, and when it does, players, my gosh, they lament not seizing upon it. Viktor Hovland did that yesterday, and Justin Thomas did not. Justin Thomas, when the event was over, spoke very positively about himself, and he has very good reason to think positively. He is coming back from his own abyss, relatively speaking. He still has not won since the 2022 PGA Championship. But when I talk about opportunity and how it doesn't come around every day, well, Phil Mickelson won 45 times on the PGA Tour in 666 starts. Tiger Woods, and this is kind of ridiculous, but even in a modest way, it still proves the point. 82 wins, 378 starts in his career. Rory McIlroy, who rolled his own winning odometer to 28 last week, 261 starts. These are the best players all time. And then, of course, Jack Nicklaus, and I'm not putting Rory in that best of all time, but he's among right now the top 15 to 20 all time. And then Jack, 73 wins, 584 starts. Those are audacious numbers. But if you start thinking about the actual winning percentage, they are, in the grand scheme of things, on the more modest side, because it just doesn't happen that often. And I remember on a few occasions, and most recently it was a few years ago, it was Justin Thomas who left Riviera after having a very regrettable final round, seething about not closing. Because one, they're all hyper-competitive. They're competitive in ways that we would be unfamiliar with. I'm talking about competing with you to determine like how long it would take for, if there's 4 of you in the car, to walk into a convenience store, and then Justin's driving and he says to the other 2 guys, because one buddy went in, I'll bet you $100 that he won't be back out in the car in 90 seconds. And I don't know if it's $100, but you get my point. They can't help themselves. They want to dig in and beat you in everything. So when they have the opportunity to close and it slips through their fingers, you can look at it a lot of different ways. And I appreciate the fact that Justin Thomas looked at this loss or not winning in a very positive frame, and he has a lot of reasons to feel really good. And for Viktor Hovland, I'm not really sure. He won the golf tournament, and that means that he's now won for the 7th time. But it doesn't solve all of his ills, because he even said himself, I hit a lot of disgusting shots. The game is ridiculously stupid, but yet we play because there's just either a lot or just enough to make it redeemable for us to want to do it again at the recreational level. And for these guys, they don't know anything else. They always think they're close, but they also, when they're far away, think they'll never think they're close again. And that's why when I said to you, it was about a month ago, and we were talking in some detail about Max Homa. And I said, you have to understand that, like the 2 great thoroughbreds in the late 70s affirmed in Aladar, doubt and belief a lot of the time they are neck and neck. And then belief gets out in front of doubt, and you think the doubt is a mile behind you. But in actuality, it's just a neck behind. And for Viktor Hovland, after 80, a week ago Thursday, here's a guy who birdies 16 and hits 2 sublime shots. Iron off the tee to the right-hand side of the fairway, then hits the perfectly weighted iron shot on 16, makes birdie there, little fist pump, goes to 17. Again, great integrity to the strike, hole high, got the worm cam, a little bit of snap right to left, makes it. And this is a guy who statistically is one of the worst putters on the PGA Tour this season. You know where he was this week? Top 5. Because when they're right, they're so right you can't even believe it. So Viktor Hovland wins, Justin Thomas doesn't. And for a whole lot of other guys, it was a very, very productive week. We got much more to get to when it comes to this event and some grander thoughts and ideas, because Sean Zach, great writer for Golf Magazine, golf.com. He's got his own podcast. He's an author. He's going to join me coming up in a couple of minutes. Then at the bottom of the hour, Shane Ryan, also an author, great writer, get his thoughts, not so much specifically on this event, but he wrote some very interesting things last week about kind of the state of the relationship between the best players in the world and the fourth estate, of which I'm a member of that estate, which is the media. And what is the media as it relates to their connection to the fan base? Conversation with him as well, observations from the week in golf. It's nice to have you with us as we just get started on a Monday edition of 5 Clubs here on Golf Channel. And you can also listen on the PGA Tour Radio Network, Channel 92 on Sirius XM. We continue with you as we are joined by Sean Zach. Coming up next, right here. Back in on a Monday. This is 5 Clubs on Golf Channel. You can also listen on the PGA Tour Radio Network, Channel 92 on Sirius XM. This segment is brought to you by Golf Pride. Again, the Align Max grips that I've now got on my clubs, the best grips that I have had, not to mention the reverse taper putter grip as well. All the grips, all the best players, all the recreational players trust Golf Pride more than any grip. All right, joining me now, I know that in Chicago it's not quite warm enough. It will be soon enough, but he did spend a summer in St. Andrews, wrote a book about it, Searching in St. Andrews. He's also got his podcast, The Drop Zone. Great writer for Golf Magazine, golf.com. Sean Zach joins me now. Good morning, my friend. How you doing?
Good morning, Gary. I am doing well. I am looking forward to chatting about what was a surprisingly great tournament.
You know, I feel like Valspar has delivered more than it hasn't. You come off the players, you can, you know, as you and I were talking during the break, it's kind of, you know, it may be a little bit deflating, but this has always garnered a good field in the final leg of the Florida swing. It's a good golf course. Leaderboard always seems to be bunched. It was yesterday. So let's dive into it. Let's start with Viktor. Let me ask it to you this way. He's such a approachable guy. He's such an interesting guy, but he's so mercurial, and he's got a glaring hole in his game the closer he gets to the hole. So can you be that curious with a faulty chipping and short game and be a great player? I like generationally great.
No, I don't think so. I think the reason why Xander Schauffele has become somewhat generationally great right now is because he has no flaws in his game. And it's just a matter of putting yourself in contention and you're going to break through like he did last year. And so Viktor has that flaw at times, like he can go through 4 days and cover it up. But could you do that at Augusta National? Definitely not. Could you do that at Oakmont this summer? Definitely not. It will not work at Royal Portrush, right? So I think that in terms of becoming generationally great, those are the tournaments you have to win. Those are the tournaments he has not won. So I think the answer is no.
He, you look at his major record, he had the 1 top 10 at Augusta National. He's, other than last year, he's made the cuts going back when he was a low end. I'm with you because you know you're going to miss The winner misses more than 20 greens. Statistically, sticky chips to greens that have so much movement to them, I would think there would be just so much stress on him to cross the line there. The PGA, he's been good the last 2 years. Let me also ask you this about him just like his personality. I don't think his curiosity tortures him. He doesn't appear to be a tortured soul. He just appears to be a guy who likes to share his thoughts. Do you kind of share that feeling?
Yeah, I've always said this about the game is that it attracts addictive personalities, hyper competitive personalities. There's a reason why some of the best athletes in the world like find themselves addicted to golf later in life because they need that. Well, I think that's who Victor is. He is a bit addictive. He was asked yesterday, "Are you a perfectionist?" And he goes, "Oh, I guess you could use that word." It's like, yeah, obviously you're a perfectionist. He hits more range balls than I think any other top 20 pro over the course of a season. And he's done that for the last few years because he doesn't have all that much going on in the rest of his life. And so, like, is that a bad thing? Maybe when you get into your 30s, but he's just 27. And this is all he's ever done. So I think we're going to kind of let him roam in this field and find out what he finds.
As far as Justin Thomas, when you have a lead like he had with just a couple of holes to go and you squander that lead, does he leave there? He spoke very positively. How do you look at it? Is this a deep cut or does it sting, but in the grander scheme, he should feel really, really good?
Oh, it stings a little bit, but he should feel really good. And I think he will, right? He's going to be probably home in Jupiter already and very proud of the fact that this is the best finish he's ever had at this tournament, a tournament that tests your ability to work it left and right. Like this is a supreme test of your entire golf game. And so, yeah, JT, he also doesn't have a recent like top three finish to point to as like, oh no, I screwed up that week, and then a couple weeks later I screwed up at the Valspar. This is the peak for him for the last probably 2 or 3 years. And so like the more peaks that you have, the more time you will test to see if you've got it. And if this becomes a bit of a repetitive issue for him, then we'll address it at that point. But for him, this is just something like, oh crap, I got really close to winning again. This is why that felt really good, and this is why it happened.
You know, Sean, I'm with you on that. If you look at the round, he hits the tee shot way left on 16. He said himself the nervy shot was the third on 16 when he played back to the fairway, and then he misses the green with a wedge in his hand and wound up making 5. He had a very good ironage shot on 17. Then he left miss again on 18. You know this. He's a captivating show-off. And that makes him very entertaining. The club twirl is I mean, it's full twirl. And he's got that going on. He's got a very silly, wicked, witch-like short game. That was on display. He's got a strut to him. We haven't seen him in that full show-off mode. So being back in that, executing until the final couple holes, I think that I would put him in my more than one to watch at Augusta National. Is he kind of in that category for you?
Yes. However, can you name any year in which he has really played well at that golf course?
True.
He has slowly gotten better in his finishes at Augusta National, but I think his best year ever there was the 2020 COVID Masters. And so is he absolutely in my top 5 to watch at Quail Hollow, where he won a major championship, or at the other majors? Yes, but there's something about Augusta National that hasn't quite agreed with JT. He's missed a couple cuts the last couple of years at that golf course. So I don't like being negative on your show because it's Monday morning. We got to be positive. It's going to be a good week coming. But it's something about that tournament doesn't make sense for me with JT. That said, it's still a good time to be Justin Thomas on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, he wouldn't be alone with, as you know, these trend lines at Augusta National. You look at average number of starts before somebody wins. You look at like this incremental solving of the chessboard that is the golf course itself. I certainly get your point, but he has got to feel like if he can go around there, because he's always been an exemplary iron player, and his putting, particularly over the weekend and yesterday, under pressure, in contention, leading the golf tournament, he has been a bad putter, and especially this week, he was more than competent. He was on the good side. All right, with that said, you mentioned 5. Right now, 2 starts to go for a lot of these players, including Scottie, Scheffler, Rory, both in the field in Houston. If you had to pick 5 guys that the winner has to come out of it, and if the winner doesn't come out of it, you then have to go write for like the Daily Reader in Nome, Alaska for the rest of your career. Who are the 5?
Well, that's off the assumption that I don't want to go to Alaska for the rest of my career. But who are my 5? The obvious one is Scottie Scheffler up top. Rory would be secondarily most obvious. I think number 3 for me is Jon Rahm. People are, for better or worse, not paying that much attention to him. He's never finished outside of the top 10 since he left for Live Golf on that tour, which is, I think, incredible and reminds me that this guy is still a very, very good golfer. Then Colin Morikawa. I think he has gotten more out of his game in the last year and a half without winning than I think anybody on that level. And that means, okay, that'd be 4. Who am I who am I missing, Gary? I think
you're missing the guy who's having the best year so far.
Yeah, well, that's fair, but like I just think like Xander has, I think he's starting to slowly find it a little bit.
Agreed.
You look at the ball striking numbers, the ones that matter more than any other stat. He has, well, I think he was number 1 over the weekend in ball striking.
He was.
Give him a solid putter at Augusta National. He's contended there before. Did I just choose the top 5 golfers in the world and forget about Ludwig? That might be it.
You did. You did. And Bryson, who, again, incrementally, no record at all last couple of years, progress in terms of, his approach and execution. And I think that's why, we all get so excited, certainly about it. And we're seeing guys, including Schauffele, which I'm glad you made that point, is that that he just had certain modest goals. And that was, hey, just play your way into a place where you feel like all the elements are starting to get sharper. And I think that yesterday in particular has got to make him feel more emboldened about what 2 weeks from now holds. Let me ask you about where we are in the grander scheme of things, because the last time I had you on, we talked about the whole Live Golf PGA Tour thing, and that was weeks leading into the Players, where it appeared there was momentum. Then this last White House get-together happens, and then in the aftermath of that, you get this sense that everything kind of went in the wrong direction. What happened?
I think, as far as I understand it, there was a bit of a formal proposal shared by the PGA Tour with the PIF side of things, with Yasser Al-Rumayyan. And that proposal was unsatisfactory if you were talking about the Saudi Arabian side of things, the Live Golf and PIF side of things, to the point where I think it deeply upset them. And walking away from it, at this point, it feels like we've had a little bit of a breakup. If they were courting each other and were interested in having a relationship, maybe they had started one. This was a fight, right? This was the beginning of a breakup. And what I don't know right now is if it is a forever breakup or if it's, hey, we need to spend a month away from each other. We are on a break like Ross and Rachel, and then come back together, right? And to really like think about, okay, why did you upset me? What have you done so far that like I really like? Why is this a good partnership for the future? Right now it feels weird, and I think everyone's going to just take a deep breath. We're going to get through the Masters and then reassess. That feels probably odd for golf fans, but the last 3 years have been odd. So like this is just another page in that book.
First one to compare Liv in the PGA Tour to Ross and Rachel. I like it. Don't know if they'll Snapchat each other during this period. Texting would seem a little aggressive. It remains to be seen. But whatever they felt like they had going in the direction to Ponte Vedra has obviously stalled. Last thing, you and I talked about TGL. Here we are at the end. They've got their finals. It could be it's best of three. If you could make 2 or 3 recommendations to TGL going into 26, what would they be?
I think this is like swinging for the fences, but you got to do whatever you can do to get number one, Scottie Scheffler involved, and you got to get his Dallas co-resident Jordan Spieth involved. Both of these players have been interested in TGL, but both these players have very young families. The Spieth family is adding a 3rd child in the coming months. And it is just like, if it takes you building a pop-up TGL stadium in the greater Dallas Metroplex, you got to do it, because these are 2 of the guys that are constantly on the PIP. They're 2 of the most popular players in the world. People will go to the 3 or 4 events that we have in the Dallas area over the next 2 months only to see these 2 guys. And so if you're looking for expansion, it's Dallas first, and like the gap between Dallas and Detroit or Chicago or whoever else is like very significant. I think that's where it really starts.
Okay, we want original thought on here, and you back up the Rachel Ross thing with the satellite SoFi Center in the greater Dallas Metroplex. I appreciate you coming on a Monday morning. I look forward to seeing you at Augusta National in a couple weeks. Thanks as always.
You got it, Gary. See you soon.
All right, there is Sean Zach again. His podcast, The Drop Zone, terrific book about his summer in St. Andrews, searching in St. Andrews, and of course, his work at golf.com and Golf Magazine. We take a break. Another wonderful writer is going to join me, Shane Ryan from Golf Digest, also an author as well. He said something before the playoff as it pertained to Rory. Going to ask him about that, and also a great piece that he wrote about examining the relationship or the dynamic between athletes and the media. He is coming up next on this Monday edition of 5 Clubs here on Golf Channel and on the PGA Tour Radio Network on Sirius XM. Back right after this. Back in on a Monday. This is 5 Clubs on Golf Channel and on the PGA Tour Radio Network, Channel 92 on Sirius XM. This segment brought to you by Peter Millar. Everything that I've worn for 15 years, everything, whether I'm traveling, going to a ball game, going to a meeting, playing golf, they've got you covered. The most broad, widest, stylish apparel line there is. It is Peter Millar. All right, joining me now. Speaking of stylish, he is an author, wrote 2 terrific books, Slaying the Tiger, which at the time still is, to me, the most varnished view of the PGA Tour, which leads to part of this conversation. And of course, his book on the Ryder Cup, The Cup They Couldn't Lose. He writes for Golf Digest. I'm speaking of Shane Ryan. Shane, my friend, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Nobody has ever called me stylish before, and with good reason. So I appreciate that, Gary.
Well, I was talking about Peter Millar, but you can take that as a
yeah. I'm going to take it. I'm going to pretend you were talking about me.
Very good. We're going to get to some things that happened over the past week, but I want to go back with you to last week. I thought last week was particularly interesting. You wrote several things that a lot of people reacted and responded to and wanted expanded thought on. I want to start, though, with what you wrote Sunday night about Rory McIlroy on the eve of what was going to be that 3-hole aggregate playoff. And you said, for a few reasons, he needs to win this one badly. It doesn't seem like a leap, but for a few reasons, I think he needs this one badly. Why did he need that one badly?
Well, I think the biggest reason is just a simple athletic truth, which is that playing well under pressure is contagious and playing poorly under pressure is contagious. And I think, coming off Pinehurst, coming off, you could argue, a decade of close calls and majors, I think he needed one. I think there needs to be something that restores your confidence. And I thought it was such a great example on Sunday of how close these things are, where he's standing, I think, on 15 with the 3-shot lead.
Yep.
And almost blew it, right? And that putt on 18, I think about that a lot now in the last couple of weeks, where it moved the opposite way that he thought. It was really dark out, so it was hard to read, but it snuck right in the right edge when he thought it was going to move left. And imagine if that lipped out, what we're talking about now, and the narrative, right? Instead of it goes in, he comes back, he plays great the next day, he kind of blows Spawn out of the water, he shows his pedigree, and now, maybe he's got more confidence. So I just think those little moments are so important, and it was so big for him just to close that out. He's been playing great golf. He never really stops playing great golf, but at some point when you're there, you just got to win to basically show yourself that you can win.
I agree with you, and I'm not saying he won't have more important putts at some point during this year, but I think when we look back, if he has a historically great year and wins another major, that putt on 18 in the Players, I think, will go down as the most important stroke that maybe he made. Not only this year, who knows, as we look back on careers 10 years from now, maybe it goes into the catalog among the most important, because to your point, if it doesn't, I don't know what that reinforces. I don't know what that conjures up. I don't know if it exposes the wound that can only really be completely closed, I think, in a major championship circumstance with those 2 short misses at Pinehurst. But I'm with you on that. I want to ask you about something else that pertains to him. I remember seeing you at Oak Hill, and it was right after he had spoken, and he was very, not terse, but he was short. And it was right after you wrote, you know what, I think it might be best for him to stop talking. And essentially, he stopped talking that week. Since then, he talks sometimes he doesn't. Where do you think he is with his willingness to share thoughts before all the events he plays in, which for the most part are the biggest ones?
Yeah, it's funny to the timing of that, where I wrote it and then he did it. So just in case there's a cause and effect there and he's listening to me, I want to say on your show, Gary, I think Rory now should do a 4-hour exclusive with Shane Ryan from Golf Digest. Just in case I've got some influence I don't know about. No, I think, Paul McGinley, who I think you and I would probably agree is just one of the brightest, smartest minds in golf. We talked right before the pandemic at the Players. So keep in mind, that was before PIF was a big deal and Live was a big deal. And we were talking about Rory, and even then, Rory was very outward with the media. He was always saying a lot, and he was always doing it in front of the general media, right? Instead of just 1 or 2 of his favorite journalists or whatever, he was talking more than anybody else. And Paul McGinley said, do you think this is good for him? And, the implication was probably not. And he looked at other guys who just kind of go about their business. They say what they need to say, but they don't make themselves front and center of the discourse all the time. And McGinley's argument was maybe his golf would be a lot better if there was a little bit more focus and he wasn't introducing these distractions in this way. So, then of course, Liv comes along and we saw that play out. He became the main spokesperson of the PGA Tour. Clearly by Oak Hill, when we were talking about when he began to get terse, clearly he had realized to some degree what Paul McGinley was saying, which is like, this isn't necessarily good for me. But one point I would want to make, Gary, is that I think there's a difference between, making yourself, again, the center of every discourse in front of the full media versus having these sort of maybe doing one-on-one interviews with media that you trust, independent media that you trust, that are going to write good stories and giving them a little bit of access. For example, the interviews Rory does with Paul Kimmage, which if your viewers don't know about, they run in the Irish newspaper, the Irish Independent, and they're wonderful and intimate and really kind of show a lot about him. I think that stuff is great, and he should continue to do it. So I'm by no means saying do a media boycott, cut out the journalists completely. I think that would be awful because Rory has so much to give. But when it comes to being the main guy who's basically doing a PR job for the PGA Tour for years, I don't think that was ever necessary. And I think maybe he came to that conclusion that Paul McGinley arrived at years earlier. He came to it late, but he did come to it.
Shane, you used a big word, which is trust, and that gets to the article that you wrote. And I know that the genesis of the article was around what happened with Colin Morikawa, what he said, the reaction from the aforementioned Paul McGinley, and you can add Rocco Mediate, Brandel Chambly, their thoughts about him saying, to a media member, I don't owe you anything. Trust. How essential, how important is trust between an athlete and the media?
Well, I think it's important, but I think the way we frame it and the way you just framed it there, and I've certainly been guilty as well, is to use the media as this collective noun, as if it represents everybody who works in our business.
Yeah.
And that's not true in any walk of life. So just to throw an example out, I was with Jason Sobel on PGA Tour Radio last week, and he brought up somewhere online, there was a post that's like 10 things you need to know about Bennett Scheffler, which is Scottie Scheffler's 10-month-old son. And that's ridiculous, right? Anybody who would write that, they should quit. It's a bad thing to do. It's a bad story. It makes all the media look bad. But I would say, just in the same way that you and I wouldn't see the worst golfer, like somebody who does something awful, Angel Cabrera or whatever, and say, oh, this is what all golfers are like. All golfers do this kind of thing. That would be very, painting with broad strokes. It would be short-sighted on our part. I think for agents and for players, they have to also discern that there are differences in the media. This is, you and I are not like this other person who writes online or whatever. There are big differences. And so when you talk about trusting the media, I think that misses the point. I think you have to look individually and say, who are the media members I can trust? Who are the ones that I know are going to do an honest job telling my story, and that I can give a little bit of time to, and it's not going to result in something, dishonest or something brand damaging or whatever. And I would like to see more of that, because I think there is a vacuum right now in the kind of content we used to have from people like John Feinstein, who recently passed, where it's a media member given great access who ends up telling a wonderful story that I think is good for everybody, good for the sport, good for the fans, and even good for the players.
How many people who cover the sport of golf, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, report in a way that they think might grant them more access? So there might be some type of incremental compromise to the way that they're covering a subject. Do you think that occurs to a very modest degree, to maybe more than we would assume? Access and reporting.
Yeah, I would say golf is more vulnerable to that than most sports, because when you look at team sports, you're dealing with coaches and players who are transient, and who really, your accountability to them is not going to last 25 years the way it might in golf. And so, look, if we have agents and players who are demanding, nothing but puff coverage all the time, and they get mad and they yell at you when there's something bad, sure, I think that tendency is easy to fall into. It's a trap you can fall into, where you say, well, I don't want to go too hard because I have this decent relationship with whoever, Scottie Scheffler, whatever. And if I do this, it might kind of offend them a little bit, and they're known for being aggressive. The agent's aggressive. So I'm just not going to do that. But I think, Gary, what happens is that you end up never doing it, right? And so when I wrote Slaying the Tiger, the idea was, well, I don't really, I've never been out here before, and I'm just going to write what I see, and I'm not going to worry about access or anything like that. But how many people are there that you go up to them in the media center and they can regale you for an hour with these great, unbelievable stories they have of their time with players and incidents and funny stories and, really insightful stories, but who are never, ever going to write those. And I think that's what ends up happening, is you sort of fall into this trap of, access journalism or whatever. But in the end, what you're withholding, the price is a little bit too high for me.
When you wrote Slaying the Tiger, I said it then, I'll say it again, it was unvarnished. And I've always believed, I know it's not easy for any of us to be humanized. Humanizing somebody, it shares vulnerability. Vulnerability to me is endearing. My gosh, it's the human condition. How much do you think it's changed now that you make most of your livelihood in terms of what you're reporting on? You were, like you just said, you were not doing it a lot back then, and then you immersed yourself in the culture of covering professional golf. How much has changed since you wrote that book?
There are things. So, okay, when I wrote Slaying the Tiger, I wanted to get interviews with everybody I was covering, all the young players, Ricky Fowler, Jordan Spieth, etc. Unbelievably hard. It took all year in some cases to even get a half hour. Ricky Fowler is a good example. I got a half hour with him on the phone, and it was a surprise when it happened, maybe a month before my deadline for writing. And that was something I'd been asking for, again, more than a year. Spieth, I think I got 20 minutes with him walking at a Pro-Am. Really, really difficult even then. And I think now it's gotten even worse. One thing I wrote in the piece that I told you about was, okay, I work for Golf Digest, which is a fairly big name in golf media. Let's say I want to sit down with Scottie Scheffler or Rory or Spieth or whoever for a half hour sometime in the next 5 months. It's not going to happen. Or if it does happen, it's going to be because I beg, and maybe I've got to send the questions in advance. It is extremely, extremely difficult for someone in my position to get any time with these guys, because I think and we might talk about this later, Gary, I think they are probably questioning the value of it, right? So if you're an influencer on YouTube where you can go play 9 holes with this person and 1 million people are going to see it, you're going to do that before you're going to sit down and talk with me. But again, I think something is lost in that reality.
What else is lost in my estimation, this gets back to what Colin Morikawa expressed, is I don't know how many of them understand that. I'm not saying every media member is a conduit to a fan base, but the idea that they owe nothing, which is that's the bite, that's the one that everybody wanted to rip off the bone and examine. What is a sensible responsibility that players have to the assembled media on a week in and week out basis in terms of sharing?
I just think, again, I don't like the word owe because that gets into value judgments. If I go out to eat and the service is good, do I owe a tip to the server? The answer is no, technically, right? But of course I do tip, and everybody would tip. There are certain things that grease the wheels, that keep things running smoothly, that are good things to do. And what I wish is that golfers, agents, people on that side would realize there is a certain salutary effect, a health, a benefit to the entire golf ecosystem when there are healthy relationships. I'm not saying with the entire media spectrum. Again, there are ones that are despicable and ones you're going to be annoyed at and hate. But if you can find people who can write honest stories about you that can cover you in ways that I think are fruitful for everybody, and by that I don't mean puff pieces, I mean honest coverage, I think those stories are so good and humanize things in a way where the immediate financial value is not tangible, and sometimes that's all people think about, but the overall value, the intrinsic value to it is huge. Because look at the world of professional golfers right now, Gary. How boring do some of them seem? How greedy do some of them seem? There is a absolute lack of humanity there, and it's not them. They're human beings, and they have stories. People kind of trying to make millions of dollars and giving stock answers. And, we could use a little bit of humanization. And I think the media still can serve that function in a really, really positive way.
This is the first of what will be, I hope, a lot of conversations as we progress through the year. I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gary.
All right, there is Shane Ryan, again, terrific writer. He mentioned John Feinstein. I remember talking to John before he came into the studio years ago when he was going around talking about his new book, and John said, this guy is so talented, and he is. He's a fantastic writer. Quick break, we come back. Some observations from me. It was a volatile week at the Valspar. And Patton Kizzire, if you've not gotten a call from a half a dozen NFL teams, something ain't right. We're back on 5 Clubs right after this. Welcome back in. Couple minutes left on this Monday. Rex and Ryan coming up at the top of the hour. Rex hired Ryan Lavner with their own show from 9 to 10 Eastern here on Golf Channel. Tomorrow, Miles Russell, who is an out-of-this-world junior, just won the Junior Invitational at Sage Valley. He's finished in the top 25 in a Korn Ferry Tour event. He's going to be joining me. Chris Solomon of No Laying Up, Solly, will also be with me on a Tuesday. Observations from this week, and this segment is brought to you by Pinehurst. There's always a good reason to go to the Pinehurst Resort, the cradle of American golf. Volatile week at Valspar. I'm somebody who believes that I can diagnose people with IED. John Cook knows this. I diagnosed him with intermittent explosive disorder some years ago. I've got a very good friend, his picture's on the wall here, who I believe has it as well. I'm not suggesting that Adam Hadwin has intermittent explosive disorder, but when you tomahawk a club into the ground and it just happens to hit perfectly a sprinkler head, whether it's a Rainbird, Toro, I don't know, doesn't matter, and sets that sprinkler head off, that's one of the great viral moments imaginable. And to his credit, he sat there with the spray going in every direction, trying to push it back down to get it to stop. Adam, it wasn't going to stop. I just hope that your wife, Jessica, I saw a lot of video. I assume maybe she took one of those videos. I hope she was close by, because that is a beautiful little morsel for her to remind you of until the end of time. That was glorious. Spieth the Gala, who's one of the most delightful, affable people playing professional golf. Well, he executed the perfect club drop, pickup, boomerang of the iron that I've seen recently. Again, not easy to execute, very high on the difficulty scale. It's like a 5.9 on the difficulty meter. So he dropped the club after hitting one right, and then with his right leg, kind of was able to get the shaft at the right angle, picked it up with the grip, and then did the boomerang, probably 50, 60 yards. Another excellent intermittent explosive disorder episode. But the piece de resistance was Patton Kizzire. Looks like an athlete, 6'3". He misses a putt and proceeds to put his putter horizontally in front of him and then punted that putter. The fact that that putter hit at the perfect place to launch it straight up in the air should have gotten a call from 6 general managers of National Football League teams needing a punter on their roster. Those are my observations. Last thing, our boy Eric from Member for a Day sent me this hat. They have raised almost $12 million for various charities getting you on great golf courses around the world. Member for a Day. Look it up, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow on a Tuesday on 5 Clubs.